Charlie by Jason William Lee, which is on Amazon Co. UK. Hope you like it. When he got back, his mum had read enough of her book, and she was feeling restless. Let's have a look round, Charlie, love, she said. I can only sunbathe so long, she said with a smile. I don't want to turn into a lobster, she added. Charlie laughed, and he thought that would be a funny sight. They decided to look round the shops which littered the seafront. There were kiss-me-quick hats, candy floss, endless sweets, sticks of rock of all shapes and sizes and colours. Mary looked at Charlie's t-shirt with the terrible stain. What you need is a new t-shirt, she said. It won't go around looking like a bad painter and decorator, she said, feeling sorry for him. At last they found what they were looking for. It was very colourful and full of images of the sun and the sandy golden beaches. That looks a lot more positive, his mum said, as she ruffled his hair. Charlie had never felt so happy, and he knew that the day was going to get even better, but unfortunately for Tinker, that wasn't the case. Chapter 64, Tinker Alone. Tinker rolled over slowly in bed, and his legs ached from the beating his dad had given him. He looked up at the ceiling, and he wished that he was somewhere else, but he had nowhere else to go. He waited for the sound of the door slamming shut and his dad's happy whistle, and then he knew that he was safe at least for a few hours, and he could relax and breathe again. He looked down at his legs, and they were slowly turning purple. At least he knew that they couldn't be seen. The last thing he wanted was the pity of others and for the people to begin asking. That's 1 minute, just turn the page. People to be asking awkward questions. That would bring more trouble for him. He sat down to a rare quiet breakfast, and he savoured the silence. It was a rare bit of peace for him. Tinker shook off the bad memories from the night before, and he began to look forward to seeing Charlie, and he wondered with a smile what he was getting up to. Charlie was always getting up to something. He got to the usual spot, but Charlie was nowhere to be seen. Tinker waited for 15 minutes, and then the rain began to fall heavier, and the last thing that he wanted to do was to get soaked. His legs were still aching, and he knew that he couldn't walk far. There was only one place to go to get out of the rain and to rest his aching body, and that was the library. Thank you, Ellie. Brilliant. Please sub me, viewers. Ooh, that's growing. It wasn't a place that he was too familiar with, but it was safe and warm, and that was all that mattered. Chapter 65, Bumping Cars. Charlie didn't know which way to look as there were things happening everywhere. It was almost too much for him. What shall we do next? He asked his mum, and she looked around. A handbag was full of rock and sweets, and she didn't want fancy walking round with anything more in her bag, and she heard the swirling sound of a fair in the distance. Hi, viewers. Let's go there, she said, and she grabbed Charlie's hand in excitement. People were queuing up for the rides, and most of them looked terrifying. Neither Charlie nor his mum were keen on paying to be scared out of their wits. The only ride that she could see which looked safe was the bumping cars. They sat together, and Charlie was nervous, but he knew that it was going to be fun. And it was. As soon as they set off, they were rammed from behind by a courting couple. Charlie slammed down on the accelerator. It was a great feeling driving, and he looked up and he saw the sparks following them like lightning with a grudge. It looked so cool, thought Charlie, as they careered around the course. Charlie narrowly avoided a few crashes, and he was getting good at steering, and he felt his confidence begin to soar. It was a great feeling, thought Charlie, and he could hear his mum's laughter over the sound of the cars, and it made him feel good. Bang! A car smashed into them from behind, and Charlie smiled at the man. But he didn't smile back, and he had one hand on the steering wheel, and his other one was around his pretty blonde girlfriend. A cigarette hung from his sweaty lips. To Charlie he looked a little like Elvis, but without the charisma. Mary didn't seem to mind, but Charlie had bad vibes about him, and this was confirmed to be true when the youth slammed into them from the side. He seemed to be taking this too seriously, Mary said, but Charles stayed silent. He didn't want to worry her. The guy laughed, and his once innocent girlfriend looked at him adoringly. He's a thug, thought Charlie, and he'd had enough of them. Charlie gripped the wheel tighter, and this time he knew that he wasn't going to be hit. Here he comes, he thought, and he saw the trail of sparks coming towards him, and the Elvis lookalike giving him a cocky grin. 108, Elvis. Next page. Oh no. 1 minute, viewers. We're going to turn the page. Charlie steered sharply to the left, and this time he grinned as his enemy flew past him and then crashed into the barriers. He wasn't smiling as he hurriedly brushed the ash off his girlfriend's new blouse. Wow, that was great fun, his mum said, and they climbed out of the car, and once again they mingled with the crowds. What shall we do now? Mary said. I'm feeling hungry. I think it's time we had fish and chips. Oh, great idea, his mum said. I'm famished, she said, rubbing her stomach. Charlie by Jason William Lee on Amazon Co. UK. Chapter 66, Chips and Golf. Charlie could feel his stomach rumbling as they joined the long queue. He hadn't eaten much all day and he was famished. The rumbling in his stomach grew louder as the crowd grew smaller. At last they were served and they sat on a bench and tucked in. The chips were almost too hot to eat, but they couldn't help themselves, and Charlie kept dropping each chip as they were burning his fingers. You're supposed to blow on them, his mum said. Eventually the chips cooled down and Charlie could eat them comfortably. He still had to have his wits about him as the hungry-looking seagulls were circling, and they were waiting to pounce. Unlike Charlie, they had no conscience. He couldn't help himself, and he threw a chip towards them, and he watched as they scrambled over them. Don't encourage them, love, his mum said, or they will follow us all the way home. Charlie wasn't sure if this was true, but he didn't want to risk it. 109, 110. Oh, I will have to do a lot of walking to shake off those chips, Mary said, and she patted her stomach. I think we need a long walk, she said, rising up and surveying the cliffs in the distance. Charlie could see the chalky winding path in the distance, and it looked like it would go on forever. Charlie had read about the Great Wall of China at school, and it reminded him of it. They followed the white winding path, and after 20 minutes Charlie was beginning to pant. He wasn't used to walking so far uphill. Yes, sir. It was like an endurance test to him, but when he looked out at the beauty balmy sea and the boats bobbing on the water like toys, he knew it was worth the effort. He was surprised by the sight of a man hanging in the air as if by magic. Wow, look at that, his mum said. How does he stay up in the air? She questioned. He's a hang glider, his mum said, as he turned and twisted in the air like an angel and the power of an eagle. It made Charlie think of Spider-Man again, and he began to miss his comics. And he couldn't remember the last time he had gone one day without reading one. They were his comfort blanket and his main source of entertainment and inspiration. He knew that Mary was hoping that he would grow out of them, but he couldn't imagine that ever happening. The sun was now blasting down and they were both beginning to sweat. It was like they were under a microscope. Let's head for the shade, said Mary, as she saw the trees in the distance, and Mary could feel her knees beginning to buckle like the legs of an old piano, and she dabbed her head with her soaked handkerchief, and then they set off again. 110, 111. Above them, the clear blue sky was turning wispy grey with the gathering clouds. A storm was coming. Thank God we're here, said Mary, and she sat down on a fat old log to rest. Charlie's t-shirt was drenched with sweat, as if he'd just stepped out of the shower. He reached into his bag and he pulled out a bottle of water, and he drank it all in one gulp. He was that thirsty. Thanks, Charlie, Mary said. It's a good job I'm not thirsty, she added. Oh, sorry, Mummy, he said. I wasn't thinking, he added guiltily. It was at that moment that the sky cracked open with thunder and lightning. Thank you, viewers. Hope you liked my story. Please submit if you liked it. I got to go to bed now.